Hello and good afternoon, everybody here in the room and also all over the world. I'm very happy and pleased to welcome you to a session with, I think, the very strong title, which is good for a Friday afternoon, but is also something we need as the Initiative for Digital Humanism, joining forces. So today, international initiatives will be presented, and I will just briefly go through the names of the presenters, of the speakers of this afternoon session, and give a very quick intro of how we planned the session. However, I will be really brief because Claudia Reinprecht, who you can already see on your screens, I don't know, left bottom or in the middle, from the UNESCO, she is gladly and happy that she can join us, but only is available until 2:30. So this is why it's a bit of a rush to get in, but I think it's about force, it's about energy anyways. Another person that I sadly have to excuse for today is Allison Stanger from the Santa Fe National Institute in the US. Because of personal reasons, she cannot attend, but we're very happy to welcome Manfred Hauswirth from the Berlin Weizenbaum Institute. More on you a bit later, then you will be presenting, and also, of course, Jim Guszcza, here from Stanford, from the Center of Applied Social and Behavioral Sciences. And then I'm also very happy to have here on our sides in Vienna, Wyatt from the Netherlands, professor, and she will present the Digital Society and Initiative from the Netherlands. More on you also a little later. But without further ado, how we're going to proceed is it's going to be, as usual, a few minutes for each person to present their initiatives. And we also were planning to have it a bit more interactive and also to engage the reflections on what are possible barriers people who are out there with their initiatives already have encountered so far. Also, of course, the positive responses that have possibly been harnessed already. And of course, when it's about joining and it's about putting dots on the roadmap to find out more today in this afternoon session, where to connect the dots, who are possible further people on the road to join. So without further ado, may I introduce Claudia Reinprecht. She is here from the UNESCO as the Austrian ambassador to the UNESCO, and you will present digital humanism, your view from the UNESCO, but more from you in person. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak. I have to apologize at the outset that I have to leave earlier as foreseen, because as you can imagine, the crisis in Ukraine puts us all on our toes, and I'm afraid I have to run to an emergency meeting on this. So, but let me again thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I'm from the Austrian Foreign Ministry, an Austrian diplomat posted to the permanent delegation of Austria to UNESCO in Paris. We look very much forward to further cooperation with the Technical University, and I thank Professor Wertner personally for the invitation and the opportunity to work together. But also we look forward to working closely together with partners such as the IEEE and dem Verein zur Förderung des digitalen Humanismus. I'm going to speak today as an Austrian representative and not as a representative UNESCO proper, because UNESCO is the sum of 193 member states, so a truly global organization. But I can report back what the kind of work we are doing that is related to digital humanism. And I'd like to start out explaining a bit in what way digital humanism and humanistic values form actually very much the DNA and the philosophical foundation of UNESCO's work. As you all know, UNESCO, as much as the United Nations, have been founded very much on the ashes of the Second World War and the tragic crimes that we as Austrians all know very well. And it was very much this idea that since war begins in the minds of men, this is a famous quote of UNESCO's constitution, since war begins in the minds of men, back then they didn't gender language, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace have to be constructed. And it was very much a visionary, forward-looking approach in the sense that they said, without peace cannot be constructed or cannot come about if it's not based on the moral, intellectual solidarity of humanity. So UNESCO has always been the intellectual arm of the United Nations, and is very much an organization. You can sort of say it's UNO. It's the very much the central organization within the United Nations family that is dedicated to the preservation and transfer of knowledge of all kinds of cultural diversity in the sense of thoughts, cultures, and ideas. And it's the UN agency, specialized agency, tasked with the fostering of the free flow of ideas. At the heart of UNESCO's work lies very much a human-centered a vision that is strongly based on human rights. And as you all know, it's the organization that works through education, the sciences, culture, and communication and information, which are in essence the tools through which humanism and humanistic values actually become very practical. UNESCO is also interestingly the only UN agency that works for more than 30 years on the ethics of the sciences and technology. And we have not only an expert body, COMEST, that works on the ethics of science and technology, we also have two bodies, one intergovernmental and one expert body that works on bioethics. And UNESCO standard setting work in the field of bioethics and human rights is really groundbreaking. In this context, I think digital humanism works really well because we just finished working on a recommendation on the first global standard setting instrument on the ethics of AI. And we will be working soon on neurosciences, but more to that later. Maybe just to give you a better understanding of what humanism in sort of in a UNESCO context would mean is when I first started to prepare for this presentation, I came across a publication of 2011 of the UNESCO Courier. UNESCO Courier is the flagship publication of UNESCO for more than 50 years. It's been the sort of the paper that even Nelson Mandela, when he was incarcerated in Robben Island, read, and it was his window to the world, as he said. And already in 2011, the UNESCO Courier looked at humanism, and the publication was entitled "Humanism: A New Idea," and it looked at well, it tried to really undertake a critical appraisal of the different concepts that have flown around, and tried to really readapt and reinterpret humanism in order to adapt well to the challenges and realities of the 21st century. And I think that's quite interesting. It looked, it had contributions from all over the world, and certainly from regional areas other than Europe and United States. And in a nutshell, these ideas very much looked at humanism, sort of overcoming the traditional humanism that very much placed an emphasis on a sharp distinction between humanity and nature. And UNESCO is very much advocating a reconciliation between humanity and nature and the biodiversity, and trying to overcome this notion of a single reason and the absolute privilege of humans. And I think that bodes well for what we are up against when we talk about climate change and the protection of biodiversity. What is also remarkable, apart from that aspect of biodiversity and climate change, sort of this bringing back humanity into harmony with nature, is that it already looked very closely at the challenges to humanism or to humanistic ideas posed by the digital era. And as far as I could do my research, it was for the first time in 2011 that the idea of digital humanism came up in an international publication, and that was done by by a historian and chair on digital humanism, Mila. His name is Milad Duhei. He teaches here in Paris. And he advocated strongly for digital humanism. He didn't really go very much into detail, but he was already there. So I'd say UNESCO was already at the forefront of thinking on the ethics of in the area of digital of the digital age. So I spoke about our work on the ethics of AI, which I think chimed really well with the topics that have been discussed in this eminent round. Let me just maybe briefly explain what this whole recommendation on the ethics of AI is about and what makes it so special. Because as you all know, I think there are hundreds of guidelines on the ethics of AI published by regional organizations such as the OECD, the European Union, but also professional organizations, digital platforms, and whatnot. But UNESCO passed this recommendation last November. So 193 member states all over the world adopted this recommendation on a consensual basis, following a very intensive 2-year multi-stakeholder consultation, including intergovernmental negotiations. And what makes it so special is that it's truly global. It's for the first time that the Global South, in particular Africa, has been included in the discussions, and very much their voices, perspectives, and concerns have been not only included but have been paid heed. It also goes beyond the formulation of only principles and values, and has some very concrete policy areas and ideas in different fields, from education to gender equality, but also economy and labor, health, communication, information, what can be done in order to make the idea of ethics of AI more practical. What it is extremely important in international relations, at least from an Austrian point of view, is that it contains extremely strong human rights language, strong language on inclusion and gender equality. It's probably one of the first instruments of its kind that can be called a truly gender transformative instrument. And in UNESCO speak, gender transformative means very much looking at the root causes of unequal power relations and looking for solutions to overcome them. So very, if you like, positive affirmative approach. What is also special is the strong emphasis on sustainable development, this link to cultural diversity, intergenerational justice, inclusion, and the principle of leaving no one behind. That was very important for basically everyone in the negotiations to highlight the need to tackle the digital gap between the North and the South. I mentioned it already. What makes UNESCO really, I think, quite unique in UN family is that it has this holistic view of and reconciling humanity with nature and its biodiversity. And this is probably one of the first one that on the ethics of AI that have such a strong emphasis on the environment and the ecosystems. So I'll finish here. I've been talking already quite a lot. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be with you. I'm sorry that I have to leave in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but I'm quite happy to engage in the discussion with colleagues on this panel and abroad. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Claudia Reinprecht. So are there any questions for clarification right now in the moment? If not, I'm looking forward for Manfred Hauswirth's presentation and to give you a brief introduction while he is getting ready for his presentation. Just as a short introduction, he is the director of the Weizenbaum Institute, so the Institute for the Digital Society, which is the self-proclaimed slogan of this interdisciplinary institution in Berlin. And Manfred Hauswirth, are you here? Are you ready?
Nearly. I don't see.
Do you want to share your screen?
Exactly. Or... I want to share actually from my screen. Yeah.
Should be possible. Yeah. Is your screen sharing disabled? Or
okay. Give me 1 second.
In the meanwhile, I can also talk about your position at the Fraunhofer Institute for Open Communication Systems, and also add that you're a full professor for open distributed systems at the Technical University of Berlin. So did this help for the setup?
Well, I'm sharing my screen. So if you...
I cannot see it yet, unfortunately, no.
Could you share it? You have my slides?
Yeah, we can put the,
yes.
We can put your presentation up if you want. Okay, just give me a second. And then you have to give us the clues and cues when to.
Don't worry, it's only a couple of slides. So just something that we can also share with you later, so that you have a short manuscript to the things that I'm saying. I'm very sorry I cannot be in Vienna, my hometown of 17 years at the moment. I couldn't make it. Very sorry. I've been to previous incarnations of this workshop, and I found it always very, very interesting, specifically also the discussions afterwards. And of course, as it's usual in Austria, always some very nice food. Now, that's perfect. Okay. The Weizenbaum Institute came into existence 5 years, pretty much exactly five years ago, as a result of a competition of the German government. Germany was a little bit, I have to say, a little bit late to the game, but finally recognized that something like a specific research institution targeted with research on the internet. There were lots of people in Germany that did research on particular aspects of the internet. I've seen Wolfgang, my dear colleague Wolfgang Neidl. He has been doing research in that area for ages. But this was really the first institute. The idea was to create an institute, a national institute in Germany, whose research focus is the internet itself. That was a big competition, a two-stage process. Finally, the Berlin consortium, we're very happy, Berlin-Brandenburg consortium won. You see the partners. I am partnering in my role as the CEO of Fraunhofer Focus, while also being a professor at TU, but some colleagues of TU are being directors and principal investigators there. The institute, and I'll stop in a second giving you the boring administrative details, will be made permanent. We have had 2 reviews, 2 evaluations already, one after 2 years, and our 5-year evaluation, the grant was for 5 years, 50 million euros, so substantial. We had this at the end of last year, and we completed it successfully. We are having another 5 years of 50 million funding now, and after this 5-year funding period, the Weizenbaum Institute will become a permanent institute here in Germany, based on a recent change in the German constitution. So in Germany, we had to change the constitution to make this permanent, because it was not possible to fund an institute that's based in a federal state with money from the German government. So this is one of the clauses where in the German institution, one tried to prevent that the central government became too powerful. But now for research, this is possible. We are very happy. And you see the Weizenbaum Institute as one of the partners in here. This is a bit of a strange construction, you may think, but we have founded a not-for-profit organization, which will now become the owner, quote unquote, of the Weizenbaum Institute. Next slide, please. Why is it called Weizenbaum Institute? Well, I don't know whether everybody in the room knows. Probably yes, but I'm saying it anyway, because we always have people who are not aware of that, Joseph Weizenbaum is actually from Berlin, and he was also a professor in Berlin before he became famous worldwide. And Joseph Weizenbaum was one of the researchers that very early on, as a computer scientist, was taking on the idea that looking at digital systems, at technical systems, solely from a technical perspective is just not enough. Next slide, please.
No. Sorry.
Now, at the very core of the Weizenbaum Institute is a very broad interdisciplinarity. We are very strongly rooted in the technical science. I'm a computer scientist myself, but as a computer scientist, in the good tradition of Joseph Weizenbaum, I have to say there are plenty of effects. There's plenty of research that from a technical point of view cannot answer the questions. And we see it left, right, and center now, what is happening with social media, with platform economies, with information or disinformation in war times, and so on. I'm sure you're all aware of that. The reason why we are so strongly rooted in the technical sciences is also that the effects or the infrastructures that we build have an effect on the social realm and on normative systems. But on the other hand, when we change laws, or if the society changes, that also has an immediate or at least effect that very soon comes to bearing on the technical infrastructure. The research groups in the Weizenbaum Institute, we have 20 at the moment, really see this at the core of their research. So nobody from us purely works on technical law or ethics or social systems. All the research groups have people on board from all three areas. And the idea is really to look jointly at the intersection of these three areas, where recently, specifically law and ethics, I mean, think of automated systems where artificial intelligence takes decisions, becomes really, really interesting. And this is for me as a computer scientist, a very interesting discussion, what we should be allowed or what we should be explicitly forbidden to do in that area. Next slide, please. The principal and central research question of the Weizenbaum Institute, looking at the internet as a socio-technical system from any possible angle, you have written down here, as we have it on our website. This is merely as a takeaway thing. If you want to know what are these Weizenbaum guys doing, next slide, please. And here, which is probably more interesting, and this is the last slide, and I'm gonna stop after that, is what research groups we have. So we have structured the research at the moment in 4 large areas. These 4 large areas are not written in stone. So the Weizenbaum Institute is not a institute that will continue to do the same research over the next 20, 30 years. But the idea is we have a core. If the research in a certain area is still interesting, we continue. If it isn't, we also shut down research groups. We create new research groups. And in what you don't see here yet, so this is the existing, we are currently funding 4 new research groups, and 4 or 5 of them are going out of existence because we were thinking as a group of researchers, okay, that's pretty much, we've pretty much said what we can say about it, or the topic is no longer interesting, and we want to work on new areas. What's specifically interesting, I mean, I pick out just for random groups. For example, we already heard from Claudia Lamprecht the ideas from UNESCO. So for example, we have one group in people work knowledge that deals with critical maker culture. We have rooted this group very strong in the global south. So we also want to see what can people do to bridge the digital divide if they lack the resources as a society, as a state to do that, and how can we support that? And it's very interesting to look at these systems, because they come up with solutions that are also very interesting for us in the global north or in the west, however you want to call it, and we can learn from them, and we can learn a big deal. On markets and competition, for example, one which is very interesting is inequality and digital sovereignty. Digital sovereignty, you know, but also what kind of inequalities the technical, the socio-technical systems like the internet cause. In democracy and the public sphere, and that's probably something very interesting for the discussion data, digitalization and the transnational public sphere is a research group that really looks at what do these technical systems mean when states, when economies are in relation to each other, and what does it also mean if such unfortunate events like the war in Ukraine happens. On the responsibility, trust and governance side, for example, we look at the digitalization and network security. What does it mean? Public safety systems. We had floods in Germany last year that were really disastrous. There were plenty of technical systems in place. Nothing, it wasn't necessary that anybody lost his life. Just looking at the technical side, in the end, from what we analyzed in retrospect, the communication and some unfortunate social effects led to people not understanding the severity of the situation. So this is a clear example where you have a technical solution in place, but it does not cause the effects that you want. And even though there is a very large body of research in this area, we are still learning from that. At the bottom, you see three cross-cutting themes: autonomous systems and self-determination. In a nutshell, how do systems based on machine learning and artificial intelligence limit or extend our possibilities? At the moment, we are only looking, or we are more looking at the limitations as a society. Security and transparency are obvious topics, and digitalization and sustainability simply means that we are looking into the UNO goals of sustainability and see what contribution or what potential answers we can provide to the sustainability goals that the UNO formulating. That's the end of my presentation of the Weizenbaum Institute, and I'm looking forward to interesting questions and interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I saw some taking notes. Any remarks or comments right now? Not yet, but we're going to continue and dig a little deeper on what James Guszcza has to present. I hope you are able to. Are you having slides actually, or are you gonna? Yes.
I do have slides. Should I try sharing my screen?
Yes, would be great. So, and in the meanwhile, let me just briefly introduce you also. We are very happy to have you here, but I think you are in Stanford, California, and you're at the Center for the Advanced Studies of Behavioral Sciences. And yeah, towards the theory of AI practice from, if I got it correctly, a philosophical perspective as well. Looking forward.
Yes.
We can see your slides properly and hear you greatly. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Yeah, so hey everybody, it's very early for me, so I hope I'll be coherent. My name is Jim Guszcza. My background is a bit checkered. I have a PhD in philosophy from the University of Chicago, and I wish I could have been in Vienna, by the way. My thesis, one of my thesis advisors at Chicago was a student of Rudolf Carnap, who was one of the leaders of the Vienna Circle of Logical Positivists. And another one of Carnap's students at the University of Chicago was Herbert Simon, who got his PhD in political science at the University of Chicago. And he's, of course, one of the founders of artificial intelligence. So I'm very interested in the intellectual history of Vienna with artificial intelligence and the way our evolving notion of science. After I got my PhD, I spent essentially 25 years in the business world working as a data scientist. And it was such a long time ago that I started. It was before the term data science was coined, and it was certainly we were not calling what we did artificial intelligence back then, because AI meant something really different than what the term has evolved to mean today. Now, what we were doing back then seems to be called artificial intelligence. I have been thinking implicitly along the lines of these kind of machine learning based systems. So I'm not going to talk about digital technologies entirely, more focused on artificial intelligence, it's a certain type of digital technology. Implicitly, I've been thinking through my consulting work and just looking at what I was doing through a philosophical lens, I've always viewed this kind of work in terms of building socio-technical systems. I just didn't have the vocabulary back when I started thinking about this. One thing led to another, and some of the thought leadership I've been doing as part of my work as a consultant. I was the chief data scientist in the US at Deloitte Consulting. And I was doing a lot of thought leadership on AI, and I was trying to reframe the discussion because I thought a lot of the sort of like industry-led discussion and a lot of things you read in the newspaper are just kind of like hype that's sort of divorced from reality. This led me to join the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences as a research fellow a couple of years ago. And maybe I'll just say a few words about the organizations I'm working with. So the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences, CASBS, is essentially the second center for, it's the second institute for advanced study in the world. The first was the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, which is where John von Neumann invented the computer, for example. CASBS was founded a few years later in a sort of a fit of post-World War II optimism, saying, look, our technology is advancing faster than our ethics and our sense of how to harness that technology for social good. So we need another Institute for Advanced Study, maybe in the other coast of the United States, is an Institute for Advanced Study for the social sciences. So CASBS was founded with that spirit in mind. It was a long time ago. Things change, but still. One of the notable episodes in the history of CASBS was when Danny Kahneman and Richard Thaler were at CASBS at the same time. And Kahneman taught Thaler psychology and Thaler taught Kahneman economics. And this is essentially where the field of behavioral economics was born. And when I applied to be a fellow there, I said, AI needs a very, very similar development. We need an exchange of ideas between people doing technical work and people with knowledge of human psychology. There's kind of like, one of the people on my group called this a joint estimation problem. AI should not be viewed narrowly as a machine learning problem. It should be viewed more as a, quote, joint estimation problem that involves machine learning, human psychology, and value sensitive development or human ethics. So that's CASBS, a very interdisciplinary place. Rockefeller Foundation is sponsoring this initiative that I'm co-leading with Allison Stanger. And they came at us with the challenge of proposing a field building project. They're very proud of their heritage in helping build fields. In fact, they funded the first AI conference at Dartmouth University in 1956. That was the famous Dartmouth AI conference. So they were sort of involved in that sense and you know, the small sense of developing the field of AI. They also helped found the field of public health. And that really resonated with me when they told me that, because I, having come from practice, but with this kind of philosophical background, I really feel like there's a mismatch between the way the people who are building these systems in the world are trained and the way they construe their field. There's a mismatch between that and what the world needs, which, as Manfred said, I applauded that. The people that we are building these systems tend to be trained to optimize technical systems. It's about optimizing machine learning algorithms. But what we really need to do is optimize socio-technical systems. We need to optimize systems of human working with machines. That is inherently a more multidisciplinary problem than the way what people are trained to attack. So we need a new field that's grounded in a broader set of scientific principles than machine learning and traditional data science. I'm not saying this never happens in the world. It's just that it doesn't happen enough, and it doesn't happen systematically and consistently enough. So that's the gist of this: is to create, kind of write a manifesto, articulate the need for a new field of AI practice. So we're calling this the theory of AI practice. So, AI is this intellectual wild card. Michael Jordan is a very distinguished machine learning professor at the University of California, Berkeley. He says it's not only the case that the public is misunderstanding what AI is, and the experts understand. He's saying even the experts don't understand what AI is. Gerald Lanier, one of the pioneers of virtual reality, says that AI is not a technology, it's an ideology. And what he means by that is the technology is machine learning, and we seem to identify progress in machine learning with progress in artificial intelligence. And that's just a complete false association. There's me as a philosopher. I've been annoyed by this kind of rhetoric for a long time. Machine learning and data science and large scale applied statistics That's great. That can be harnessed as a force for good, for scientific discovery, for helping people make decisions and avoid cognitive biases, for all sorts of reasons. But if you just construe in this narrow way, you're not going to get real artificial intelligence. And I'll say a few more words about that. I call this the quote master narrative. It's my pun on the master algorithm. That if we keep making progress in big data and algorithms and deep learning neural networks in particular, we're going to get something like artificial general intelligence. We can solve intelligence and use that to solve everything else. We can create autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. We can put radiologists out of business, and so on and so on. That's a very seductive message. I'm quoting from a couple of years ago at the Davos summit. In public, all the business leaders were saying, oh, yes, of course, we want human-centered AI. In private, they were saying, hey, when is this stuff going to be ready so I can put 98% of my workforce out of work? Now, that's, aside from the ethics of that, I just think that it's kind of, I've always believed this is kind of like a scientifically fantastical way of thinking. It's this kind of AI ideology. It's like this false association with machine learning, that original aspiration from Herb Simon and others at the Dartmouth Conference in 1956. So those are the artificial intelligence aspirations. But what we see in the world is increasingly ubiquitous, what I call artificial stupidity, the opposite of artificial intelligence. Stupidity of our own device, stupidity involving machine learning and AI technologies. Manfred gave that very nice example just now of the floods in Germany, where we had the technology in place, but the human behavior wasn't aligned with it, and so we didn't get the right results. Vaccines, another example. We got the vaccines, but if people don't have a good kind of conceptual model or a mental model of the technology, they'll be very suspicious about it if they don't have trust. I have an early example of this from almost 20 years ago in my insurance practice. We built an algorithm to help commercial insurance carriers. This sounds very boring, by the way, but commercial insurance underwriting is the field that Daniel Kahneman was looking at when he was starting the research that became his new book, Noise, the noise in human decision making. The same expert might, or the same clinician, the same expert might make the same decision before lunch versus after lunch. There can be a lot of unwanted variability in our decisions. But we actually attacked that early on in the insurance domain by building algorithms to help insurance underwriters do a better job of selecting risks and appropriately pricing risks. Classic actuarial science, but we're doing it for more large and complex risks where you can't automate the decisions. But what we found is with algorithms, you could improve the decisions in quite material ways. But early on, one of our clients said, just build the algorithm, we'll implement it. We were nervous about it. And they got back to us 6 months later because they didn't have a lot of data. So we were nervous about just would it predict accurately. And 6 months later, they called us back and they said, congratulations, it predicts absolutely as well as we all hoped it would. And then they said, but we're losing money with it. And the reason was their underwriters tended to use the algorithm to justify giving discounts to good risks, but they didn't surcharge bad risks commensurately. So they collected less revenue with a good algorithm. And so it's a very early kind of a fruit fly type of example of this idea that you can get the technology right, but if you don't have the choice architecture in place, the decision ecosystem in place, you're going to get bad results. So that was an example of artificial stupidity. The technology was fine, but the results were stupid. So the formula might be machine learning plus smart human-centered design gives us artificial intelligence. The technology optimized narrowly without attending to these issues of human decision-making and human ethics gives us artificial stupidity. And I don't need to go through all these examples on the slide. These are all more recent examples. A guy driving, it's always going to be a guy driving his semi-autonomous Tesla from the back seat and being very, very deliberate about that. He has a bad mental model of the technology. He's doing something really stupid with a technology that could be smart. The right combination of a semi-autonomous vehicle with a driver who understands the technology, that can get us safer roads. But the way it's rolled out, you say that this is full self-driving, that gives the person the wrong psychology of this technology, and something stupid will happen with it, okay? We also have people building algorithms on biased data sets, Frankenstein data sets, again, narrowly construing the data. They're not thinking about the relationship between the data they have and the social processes that generate the data. All these things need to be kind of incorporated into practice in ways they're not being systematically done right now, okay? A parable that I often use to motivate this, we need to shift the focus from autonomous systems like that, let's solve intelligence and use that to solve everything else. We need to focus the attention away from that, which is an easy thing to train people to do. It's easy to train practitioners to optimize machine learning algorithms. But what we really need is to optimize systems of humans working with algorithms. And I won't go through the whole story, but Gary Kasparov, who's a big Putin critic these days, but I quoted him for a different reason. He was famously beaten by a chess algorithm in the late 1990s. He invented a new game of advanced chess when players working with computers could compete against players working with other computers. And he realized that he wasn't as good at advanced chess as he'd been at traditional chess. Why? Because to be a chess grandmaster, you have to have this unusual ability, which is very hard for most people, to memorize a lot of chess patterns. Well, computers can do that. So if you outsource that aspect of playing chess to computers, that's an equalizer. So several years ago, there's a big global competition, I think it was held out of Germany, called freestyle chess. And it was a global competition where anybody could enter. And you had some of the chess grandmasters of the day using the strongest computers of the day, competing against whoever wanted to join. And there was an upset victory. These two guys pictured here, who were two chess amateurs in the United States, they were using 3 ordinary laptops, each equipped with a different chess program. And they won. They beat the grandmasters using the supercomputers. And Kasparov made this very prescient comment. He said, a weak human and an ordinary AI system, but a better process of working together was superior to the strong computer alone, or a strong computer with the top human experts, but an inferior process. So setting up that process is where the action is, but that's not where the focus is. We need to have a discipline that's focused on that. And again, as I said earlier, that is an inherently multidisciplinary, socio-technically oriented process. There's this, the real foundation for this discipline, or for this envisioned discipline that I'm kind of dreaming up, or hoping we can create, is not just deep learning. It's rather a kind of a central discovery in the history of artificial intelligence. It's come up again and again, which is called Moravec's paradox, or the AI paradox. The headlines are all dominated by things that are very hard for humans that machines can do, like playing Go, or doing predicting protein folds and things like that. The headline that's buried is that things that come very naturally to humans, like curiosity, empathy, hypothetical reasoning, causal understanding, judgment, ethical judgment, scientific judgment, understanding and caring about the difference between appearances in the data and the reality underlying the data. Those are all things that are very hard, if not impossible currently, at least, to outsource to computers. So I'm not saying this is in principle difficult, but it's not going to happen on the horizon. What we really need is a discipline that starts with this observation of the complementarity between human and machine intelligence, and says, if we get that process right that Kasparov talked about, if we get that partnership right, we can have a diversity bonus, is what Scott Page calls it. We can take different forms of intelligence, and kind of like optimizing a stock portfolio. You get something greater than the sum of the parts. You can create human-machine collective intelligences. That's what we should be aiming for. So we're trying to write a manifesto right now. But that was all kind of like the motivation. And frankly, I've been giving those slides for about 5 years, starting with my time at Deloitte. Motivated by my own personal experiences, but just thinking about it from a broader lens. We're trying to articulate what a sort of a collective intelligence, a field of engineering for hybrid intelligence, you might call it. I'm calling it hybrid intelligence design and engineering, HIDE for now. And I'd like your criticisms. Here are some design principles. I don't know if this is complete, but this is what we've got so far. The goal is not machine autonomy. Right? Remember what OpenAI said, our goal is machine autonomy. We want to build machines that can, in principle, put people out of work. No, the goal is to extend human autonomy by building algorithmic systems that in such a way that the relative strengths and limitations of human and machine cognition can counterbalance each other, motivated by the AI paradox. So this is not only motivated by a scientific principle, it also provides an ethical North Star. This is about extending human capabilities, right? Humans need to make decisions all the time, but our evolutionary endowment is such that we're bad at making decisions in an unbiased, non-noisy way. This is what Daniel Kahneman has taught us. So algorithmic systems, if they're designed properly and implemented properly, can extend human capabilities. That's an ethical North Star. Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, they talk about their fundamental, their approach to ethics is the capabilities approach. It's all about extending humans' abilities to unfold their capabilities and be and do what they want to be and do. So this is very much an ethically aligned approach to algorithmic technologies. Second, design decision environments are essential to hybrid intelligence design. That should be designed along with the algorithms. That was what that example of the underwriting. we knew this, we didn't have the vocabulary for it, but we knew this was essential. This was the secret sauce. It wasn't just building the algorithm. It was setting up in advance, designing the processes whereby people would fold that algorithm into their workflows and their decision processes. This has not been done systematically with Teslas, for example, where people think they can drive for the back seat. Just a few more minutes. I'm sorry if I'm running over. These decision environments have to be designed. I'm sorry?
Can you manage to wrap it up in about 1 minute, maybe?
Yes, I will. These decision environments must be aligned.
Round, please. Thank you.
Sure, sorry. We have to design these decision environments to align with human psychology. We should design for outcomes, not algorithmic outputs. And the designs must be sensitive to context when applying the above principles, right? There should be a multi-stakeholder approach where local knowledge and local values are reflected in the technologies. So what we have is something like machine learning operations. What we need is this more broad field. I'm calling it hybrid intelligence design and engineering, HEDE. There's an antecedent that we're exploring right now to implement something like this, which is the idea of pattern languages. So Christopher Alexander was an architect, and he wanted to come up with a design language that would enable us to build more humanistic built environments like cities and buildings by giving the denizens of those cities and buildings and the stakeholders a shared language. They could speak with the architects and designers building those buildings and cities. And he called that a pattern language, sort of a repository of ideas for building cities in ways that kind of reflect human needs and reflect human values. Interestingly enough, that has been very influential in the computer science world. So object-oriented programming, the design of websites, and even designing games, there have been pattern languages designed for all of those fields. The author of that second book, The Design of Websites, James Landais, is Stanford Human-Centered AI co-director, and he's on our group. He made this suggestion. So design patterns, on the one hand, they're collections, they're interlinked collections of sort of best practices for solving recurrent problems. So it's like a very practical thing, but they also form a language that can integrate ideas from multiple domains, like data science, psychology, ethics, and so on and so on. But they can also serve as a kind of boundary object that facilitates kind of collaboration amongst people that have local knowledge and very specific domain knowledge, and different perspectives on the values that are at play here, and the people developing these systems. So we're thinking this might be a very promising approach. It's creating a pattern language for hybrid intelligence design and engineering. And I'll wrap it up there. And sorry for going over.
Thank you very much. And we will come back to your points. Thank you. Yes, and now we're happy to have you here in person, Sally Wyatt, but in the meantime, we have applause for you and of course, questions maybe. Thank you. Any questions, clarification, needs for comments, urgently placed? No. So yeah, I can welcome you over to the stage and we will stop this one. This is not my computer, so I'm not so familiar where it's going to watch, but I'm introducing you in the meantime. So, and of course, you will probably show a lot of your work from the Netherlands, but you're here from the Dutch initiative. You're originally trained as an economist, and you as a professor are here to present how working together for a Dutch digital society, you're working across disciplines, but also across institutions. So it's a very large initiative, I think, bridging all the questions that have been tackled during the morning session. What is policy making? How can you also go in that direction? And yeah, I'm very much looking forward for your in-person presentation.
Thank you very much, Irina. So to change slides, just the arrow key. Yeah, okay. Well, welcome everyone. I know it's Friday afternoon. We've had a long couple of days. I hope you're still awake. Yeah, I'd also again like to thank the organizers for this wonderful opportunity to be here and to see all of you. You've heard me mention a couple of times in the last 2 days a digital society bachelor program that I've been involved in setting up at Maastricht University. That's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm actually going to talk about the Dutch Digital Society kind of research program, and I'm one of the national coordinators of that. It was set up by the WSNU, that's the Dutch Association for Universities. They changed their name about 6 weeks ago. They're now the Universities of the Netherlands, but I think you should still be able to find them without abbreviation. I must admit, before they started all of this, I only knew the WSNU as something that negotiated with the government about, you know, research and education budgets, and negotiated with the unions about our salaries and our holidays. And I think the kind of senior management of universities, they kind of met to discuss these things. At a certain point about 5 years ago, thought, well, this is all rather boring. Let's try and do something content related together. And they very quickly came to the theme of digital society, that this was something that all 14 Dutch universities were working on, and that it would be good to kind of join forces and see what could be done together. So very much focused on, you know, an interdisciplinary approach, on collaboration between universities, which I must say, I think I found quite heartwarming. I don't know what it's like in your countries, but over the last sort of 15 years, competition between Dutch universities seemed to be the major policy approach. And this was very much a kind of concerted effort. Saying, no, we should be working together. This is an important kind of national issue, has important consequences for Dutch society. So let's see if we can try and work together on this. So the original document, which isn't this one, I can't remember what it's called, and that's, I think, selective memory on my part. It is possibly the worst document on digitalization I've ever read. So I don't recommend you read that. It doesn't have an author, I think, to protect the guilty. And I mean, it opens with something like, we're at the dawn of a new age. I thought, the dawn? Where have you people been for the last kind of 50 plus years? But okay, so that was quickly kind of forgotten. It was served as a kind of motivating kind of device. And then a number of universities were asked to identify a few professors to kind of go along and have meetings like this. And we produced this document, which is better. It's not perfect, but it's better. A kind of research agenda. So we came up with 7 program lines, but I'll come to those in a moment. And I think, you know, it could be an interesting study for somebody, or a kind of interesting comparison between, I don't know, machine learning and topic modeling on the one hand versus humans, to compare the kinds of statements that we've been seeing over the last 2 days from different programs, national education programs as well. This is what we came up with. I think one of the interesting things, I'm assuming you can read it at the back, so I won't read it out loud, but one of the interesting things is a sentence in the middle. Society is changing, sometimes for the better, but certainly not always. And I think this is sometimes, I mean, I've collaborated a lot with computer scientists over my career. I think it's one of the differences between the natural sciences, engineering on the one hand, and the social sciences and humanities on the other. In the social sciences and humanities, we don't believe in progress. You know, you look out in the world and there are lots of reasons not to believe in progress. Whereas I think computer scientists, you know, have very optimistic, positive people and want to make the world better, and that's great. But so that's, I think, a kind of interesting, but yeah, it'd be an interesting exercise to compare these kinds of statements. So, but we did recognize that it, you know, the issues raised by digitalization, you know, we really need to kind of work together. So that's with the kind of one of the foundational ideas about this. So yeah, another kind of element of those sorts of things. The 7 themes we came up with, which you might not be able to read at the back, there are 2 sort of cross-cutting themes. One called responsible data science, another around cybersecurity, and then 5 more thematic areas on cities, health, work, democracy, and learning and education. And these were all kind of, as I say, developed by the kind of assorted professors from the different universities who kind of came together to do that. And we kind of collaborated, and you know, somebody made this nice graphic. This is a more boring diagram, and I won't spend much time on this, just to kind of illustrate my place in the grand scheme of things. So we have a couple of professors heading these different lines, and then we have 3 national coordinators, and I'm one of the 3. For social sciences. These have changed a little bit over the years, but the people, And the way it worked, which might be interesting for people who think about money, is that universities could adopt one or more themes and say, okay, we're really interested in contributing to theme X, Y, and Z, and another university, you only pick 2. But anyway, if you picked a theme, and adoption here meant you freed up a professor for a day a week, and you paid for at least 1 PhD or postdoc. So we had, well, I'm sure you've all had to do these kinds of things. We had some objectives, and then we had to come up with like performance indicators. And partly because of Corona, we haven't really kind of monitored these as well as we might have done. But I think, again, we've been talking over the last day or two about quality and how you kind of how do you know whether an interdisciplinary program is working? And one of the things we came up with was, do we start to cite each other more? Both, do we start to collaborate, so co-authoring, but also do we kind of at least read each other's work and learn from it and cite it? Would also be a kind of interesting kind of indicator. And some of the others are a bit more kind of self-evident and things we might have thought of anyway, but we can talk more about that if people are interested. So we had these objectives, we had a number of activities. I got the kind of long straw and had the fun activity of coordinating monthly meetings with the PhDs and postdocs. And this was, and some of them were computer scientists, some of them were neuroscientists, some of them were sociologists. And we had these monthly meetings, sometimes with speakers, sometimes talking amongst ourselves. And I think that was also a kind of venue for people to kind of learn from each other, to try, we were talking again earlier about this, to build a kind of interdisciplinary language, common understanding. So this was from all 7 of the program lines. And of course, we wanted to engage with the world and in the Netherlands and elsewhere. I know Irina asked us earlier to talk about some of the challenges. I think one of our biggest challenges was collaborating with the Dutch AI coalition. It goes back to, I think there was a question in the chat, why are we talking about AI? Well, we had maybe, I don't know, maybe a couple of million euros in total equivalent. About 2 years ago, the Dutch AI coalition was given approximately 100 million euros. But yeah, that's a different story, but if people are interested, we can talk more about that. And we decided to stay a little bit out of it because digitalization is more than AI. And we wanted to keep a kind of broader view. So we also organized conferences every year for obvious reasons. We didn't do that in 2020, but we did have a conference in November a few months ago. It was kind of hybrid. And one of the things we did at the end of the conference was announce a team science call. So this was kind of, it wasn't only open to the people officially participating in the Digital Society program, but to anybody in the Netherlands. And we had some funding available and people, and it was one of these great low threshold applications, 1 page. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but still. And you had to address an important societal issue, promise to come up with some kind of solution, had to be a very multi-transdisciplinary group, and from more than 1 university. So, this kind of, we really had to, work together. And these last few points here are some of the projects that we funded or are about to start funding. And I think they kind of illustrate very nicely the sort of, what is possible when you get people across disciplines kind of working together just for 1 year to come up with a prototype or a model or something that also seriously kind of takes into account kind of societal and ethical issues as well. And the previous slide was in the first round, a digital literacy coalition, which had all, it was only, I don't know, 60, 70,000 euros, but it had all of these partners really trying to kind of work together on digital literacy in the north of the Netherlands in Groningen. It was a bit challenging doing this in public libraries during Corona, but they did their best. So Yeah, that is basically what the Dutch Digital Society program is about. The Dutch, our rectors decided to continue the program for another 3 years, and we'll see what we come up with next. Thank you.
The first question.
Just one question to your presentation, thanks. How did you succeed that you have these meetings with the parliament? Because this is a really hot issue, because normally you are reaching out, we are reaching out, and we have a real problem to have access. And you seem to have a commission which you have regular meetings.
Yeah, so it's interesting because right from the beginning we said, okay, we want to engage with societal partners, including the parliament, including ministries, and actually they came to us.
Oh.
And I think it's a bit of there's some real Dutch people present. I'm just, I just live there. I think it's quite a Dutch thing. It is a small country, but so is Austria. And there's quite a lot of circulation between universities and government ministries, and people know how to find each other. Okay. So I think that kind of played a role. And I met I didn't mention them because I was a bit concerned about time, but we did meet groups I didn't know existed. I don't know if my Dutch colleagues know. So in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Internal Affairs, there's an AI and human rights research group. Who knew? Doing really interesting work, great people. But some of them had worked at TNO, which is a kind of quasi, technology assessment, development of new technology organizations. Had worked with other people, and they also have a group on digitalization and wetgeving. How do we translate wetgeving, Dutch people? Kind of lawmaking. So to look at different laws that are coming, or things around digitalization, what kind of laws do you need, thinking about things that are coming from the European Commission, and how do we translate those into Dutch law. I thought, wow, this is great. So there are lots and lots of groups, quasi-governmental, and they kind of know how to find each other.
A second very short question. This digital society is an initiative of the university, or was it based on a call of the government?
No, I didn't emphasize that enough. It was an initiative of the universities. So it's an academic-led research program. So as I say, the rectors and the presidents of the universities, they committed the funds, and okay, there's a little bit of unevenness. Some universities are bigger and richer than others. So it's not driven by government or by business interests. And that was also one of the things we wanted to keep when all this money came for AI, which is very, very much driven by economic priorities.
Thank you. Jim and Manfred Hauswirth, Jim Guszcza, do you have any reflections on your challenges or also successes you had so far, also maybe in reaching out of university, of academia in relation to governmental or other collaborations, projects being put in place, change being made?
Who should go first?
I'll keep mine short. Okay. Yeah, I'll keep mine short since I went too long before. So far, it's been reasonably smooth because the people I've reached out to have been quite enthusiastic about this idea. So getting the people to be on our advisory group and our kind of core group, they've been enthusiastic about it. And I should have said, we've got about a dozen people in our core group who are from computer science, psychology, behavioral economics, ethics, law, and political science. But I think the challenges are really in the future, because even if we, and kind of articulating what I just tried to articulate has been challenging enough in writing. But once we do that, okay, how do you create a field, right? How do we do the equivalent of creating a public health field? And I'm hoping that we can use the sort of convening power of the Rockefeller Foundation to help advance this. But sort of like businesses, academic organizations, societies need to want to embrace this vision and change the way we actually go about doing things. So I very much think of this as being a way of going from the academy to actually influencing the way practice happens in the real world. And we're only at the beginning of that process. So any ideas people have would be welcome.
Thank you. There is a question right now to
not related to yours. It's a new question.
It's a new question. So maybe Manfred also goes with this. Yes, thank you.
We, being termed the National Institute, we never had the problem of engaging with politics. Actually, to a certain extent, we probably were engaging too much or being engaged too much. The issue here is the topic of digital humanism, digital society, the internet, but lots of terms isn't interesting for a lot of people. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody wants to share an opinion. But what is as a scientist, I'm asking what's the net effect? So what I mean self-critical, but also critical is there is a lot of conversation, but very little action. And as an engineer, as a trained engineer, I have to say, okay, at some point in time, we have to move on from talking to doing. And the doing is not enough. I mean, not in Germany, not in the European Union, not worldwide. And I think we as a scientific community can probably push a little bit more in that direction, because, like doing another analysis, another research paper, yes, great. We advance knowledge, but we do not influence society. So if we have digital society in the name, or digital humanism, we also need to influence that thing and not only analyze thing. That is the important thing. What I see, if I'm looking a little bit more inward, is that something has occurred, at least in my daily work, which I actually thought we had overcome. That this is the problems of different disciplines talking to each other. So in the beginning, there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of people who said, "Hey, what are you doing? I'm really interested in your work." But recently, I have seen this going, the conversation going into the other direction. So, for example, there have been complex and really tough discussions between: are we analyzing things that happen, or are we building things that make analysis possible again? And I don't think this is a either or. It must be done in a synergetic way. So as a computer scientist, I want to go in a direction which is beneficial along the lines that James has phrased it. But I need also the input of the other sciences to be able to do that. And that means we have to listen more to each other, rather than saying, okay, as a computer scientist, say, as a social scientist, I say, or as an economist, I say. And the third problem that I see, and then I'll stop, is that we are taking economy not into the picture sufficiently. So recently, we have had a lot of discussions here in Germany. Okay, what's the role of economy in the picture? I think as a scientist, we cannot do it without taking economy into the picture, because economy shapes society, as say the internet shapes society, and vice versa. The society shapes economy. And a lot of the problems that we are facing at the moment is that we have not looked into these issues early enough. It's more like, oh God, something, everybody's talking about the platform economy and how powerful the internet platforms are. Well, yes, we know that for years. This is again talking but not doing. If we want to change that, and if we want to make it more broader and support people to have more access and to more possibilities, well, we need to get economists on board. And I found my conversations with economists always very fruitful, because a lot of the effects that we see, they are looking into for many years, and they are quite insightful in that. You see, last sentence, in academia, we often see it, okay, we want to do academic research, and as soon as it gets into the commercial realm, it's bad. No, it isn't at all. This is just getting from talking to doing. For a lot of areas, economy is the natural counterpart. And I think we need to strengthen this much more to get into the right direction.
Thank you. Here's a comment, and Paul Timmins in a second. Thank you.
No, actually, I have a comment and a question for Manfred. I believe that, putting people from different disciplines to work together, as you're doing in the Weizenbaum Institute, on these problems, is very valuable. The problem is, especially for the young people, when it comes to evaluating their work, and they go back to their own disciplines, right? So are you facing this problem, and how do you handle it, in terms of assessing people? Yeah.
Carlo, was the question from you? I just heard.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, it was mine.
Great. First, thank you for the question, and great that you're in Vienna participating again. This is a really, really difficult challenge. When we say, okay, work together and publish in an intersecting field, very often this doesn't happen. The people who commit to that are actually hurting their scientific careers. So one of the research groups that I am also, that's one of my research groups, we're looking into impact in evaluation systems. So how is scientific impact measured? And in my opinion, we could have hours, days, weeks of discussion on that. I think scientific impact is not measured correctly at the moment. In our disciplines, yes, but across disciplines, no. At the moment, my recommendation to young scientists is be open, but make sure that you're publishing in your own area. And sometimes, but we have really a few examples, which we can, maybe 2 or 3 good examples, where this interdisciplinary work was really recognized as a significant contribution. We cannot solve this as one institute alone, and we cannot solve this as one discipline alone. And I think this is where international cooperation is really extremely necessary, that we come up with new impact measurements, also to give young scientists and also important topics that go across disciplines a better chance. Now, outside the digital humanities area, we are trying also to do this in Berlin from a university side. The Berlin universities won a structural excellency grant in the last round, which is substantial for 7 years. And as one of the research one of the areas we are putting the money in is called research quality and impact. So here we are really trying in an academic environment, also very interdisciplinary, to come up with ideas based on what is done in certain disciplines already, how we could make these impact systems better for young scientists who are interested in doing interdisciplinary research. How this will work in the long run, we don't know. We have a couple of proposals. Last year, we also gave we invented a new prize on research quality that really also focuses on people and organizations that contribute to that. And fortunately, we found a private sponsor, so there's also really substantial money behind that. Last year, for example, the inventor of Archive or the creator of Archive won the prize, but we also give the prize to young scientists who work interdisciplinary and have an interesting way of looking problems of looking at problems in their area. So the young scientists who won it were actually medical scientists that took a lot of social aspects in the picture when they were trying to ensure reproducibility of their results. So even in a hardcore topic like medicine, they have recognized that actually a lot of social aspects need to be taken into picture to have results that are actually credible, trustworthy, and reliable.
Thank you. And to the question or comment by Paul Timmers, please.
Perhaps I can pose the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got a question that is perhaps provocative. Perhaps we should stay away from it, but still, because we have such great international experience and initiatives together here, something that I was wondering about is in many of our activities, we gradually, because of the technologies, take cybersecurity or AI, but also because of the changes in the world, we are starting to get closer to dual use or defense applications or matters or defense related research. And I see it also at the European level. The programs are still separate, but they are, as George yesterday also mentioned it, they're getting closer to each other. There are also initiatives that are not immediately research initiatives, but can be can link to research that are having explicitly a dual use dimension. So a semiconductors initiative, for example, makes also some kind of bridge to dual use. So my question is actually, should digital humanism say, no, we stay completely away from anything that is dual use or defense? Should we really get into topics, and if so, into which ones then? Or is it just perhaps sufficient to exchange experiences? How do you deal with it when you have an institute and you're getting close to this? How do you deal with that kind of bridging towards or linking towards the defense community?
So yes, this is a general question, I think, that should trigger all of our thoughts. And you did not address anybody specifically, but it's the question, how much in detail should digital humanism itself engage in specific projects, specific areas? Did I summarize this correctly? And yeah,
well,
and
perhaps not into specific ones. Could also be that it is simply a matter of exchange of experience, because we internationally are running into that in various circumstances, and we may want to talk about it. So there are two options, kind of projects or exchange of experiences.
Projects, yes, thank you. And there's maybe a comment related to this. Yes, perfect.
Yes, so I think we cannot ignore this matter, and many people prefer to ignore it because it is difficult to tackle. At IEEE, we have established a group to work on this specific topic about autonomous weapons. And it is now public. We have done a lot of work without being visible, but now it is public and everybody can join. So Paul, if you are interested, I can send you the contact details. And we did not start from an advocacy position. The question we posed, assuming there are people who really care in different levels of administrations, agencies, even in the industry, what are the practical problems they face in trying to do a good work and being ethical by using these technologies. So we don't theorize much, but we try this. And we came with a list of categories of challenges that people are really facing. And this is very interesting because this organized a discussion. Now it is public and we have 4 subgroups. And I will be pleased to send this to you, Paul, and also to anybody. And this is quite mixed. So we have people from Europe and the US. So both, it is more or less transatlantic, but it's still a very interesting set of people. And I think this is very valid, your question, because I remember the Obama administration, they did a lot of work, AI now and so on. And about this thing, they had just a footnote that there may be a problem there, but we're not talking about this. Come on, this is where the money goes. This is cowardice. And we should do something. We cannot ignore the technical communities, in my opinion.
Thank you. Sally Wyatt was first.
Yeah, also on this point, I mean, I think it is an extremely important question. And I've sometimes been in discussions with colleagues in the Netherlands and elsewhere that, you know, we can't stop progress. This is technological development. There's nothing we can do about it. I think, well, actually, we have all sorts of historic examples where we have put moratoriums on things and we have decided we are not going to invest in this. And we do have multilateral agreements. And okay, some dictators violate these, but that doesn't mean one shouldn't kind of try and think about, you know, what are the potential consequences of our work. And I mean, the group I mentioned a few minutes ago in response to Hannes, the AI and human rights group, I mean, they were very, very concerned with, you know, all this money that was going to the AI coalition, as it's called in the Netherlands, primarily for, you know, economic growth and jobs, which is, you know, nothing wrong with it, but well, actually there's quite a lot wrong with economic growth for itself, but leaving that aside, but they was like, look, you know, we can't just develop technologies that are against the Constitution, whereas quite a lot of AI developments are against many democratic constitutions in terms of, you know, reversing the presumption of innocence, categorizing people, profiling people. These are all things that in many democratic societies are rightly, you know, severely questioned. But I think, you know, there is this sort of momentum with the technology, and I think, you know, you know, most of, I don't know about all countries, but, you know, most countries do have some kind of scientific integrity code, and most of those do say, think about what you're doing, people. Don't just follow the money or follow the technology, but think really hard about what you're doing and try and minimize actually not only unintended consequences, but things that are really quite clearly intended, but nonetheless wrong.
Yeah, thank you. So there's one comment in the audience here, and then Manfred. Yes.
Thank you very much. One comment to Mr. Paul Timmers. The Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is on record that digital humanism should deal with the topic of autonomous legal weapons. And we're actually already planning a workshop with our Ministry of Defense on the topic. Now, I think we should be realistic about it. We should have an idea on how far we can go in a world which also knows and threatens to use nuclear weapons. But of course, nobody will hinder us thinking about the possibility of making digital world more humane in every aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a quick comment by Hans-Christoph Steiner, who also put the example of Google Glass in the comment section here, and also the point that actually it was technically possible, but instead people pushed back with by ethical concerns. And I'm very happy that this discussion, although we have, I think, about 7 minutes left altogether, is now going to the social silences. It's addressing the elephant in the room. We're confronted with a war, and I think it is very important that this topic is now on the stage. However, Manfred, I don't know where your remark will or comments will go. I would still invite you also to look at finalizing your statements toward the future. It doesn't need to be a bright one, but where are we in putting up solutions? Coming back to also yesterday's comment by Helga, a university has departments, the world has problems, and also this very specific way of looking. Why do we do interdisciplinarity? To solve problems. It's not l'art pour l'art. And yeah, maybe Manfred, I look forward for your comment.
Okay, I'll be brief. Paul, thank you very much for these questions. I think there's no point beating around the bush. My short answer to your question is, as a scientist, you always have to go where it's dirty and it stinks. So that also implies we have to look into potential technologies that can be dual use. Give you a practical example in 2 sentences: quantum computing and quantum communication. If, as a scientific community, we do not know what you can do good with it, we also don't know what bad things you can do. And for example, a very good outcome already is colleagues of mine in Vienna developed a quantum communication system that allows you to run secure communication over any insecure communication. As soon somebody tries to tap in, you will know. So why is this so important for Europe? Let's say we always have these discussions about digital sovereignty coming. Let's say Huawei essentially owns our telecommunication systems in terms of hardware. That's a fact. That's the largest provider. So we can ban it or we can collaborate. With this system, for example, you can establish secure, provably secure communication over insecure hardware. So that's something very good. There may also be bad examples, but I'm an optimist. I think it's more important to look at the opportunities. Now, as a final statement, I think, you know, like symposia like this symposium are essential actually to get the discussion going. Every time I'm here, and even only for a short period, I learn new things. And as a community, I think we need to keep this discussion process very, very much alive, and also the experiences from different countries and from different disciplines, because I think that's the only possibility that we move forward with this extremely important field. And I'll stop at that.
Thank you. James Guszcza, do you also want to add some outlook?
Yeah, just a couple of. I'll talk about a challenge and then maybe some low-hanging fruit and a promising closing remark. Regarding what Paul said earlier about dual use, I sort of violently agree that it should be part of the scope of what we're talking about. And I think, you know, it doesn't even have to be like physical weapons. It can be social media that is absolutely being weaponized. And it's an example of the technology. It's motivated by economic incentives. It's kind of designed to hack into human psychology. It's designed to exploit human frailties rather than help ameliorate human frailties. So that's the kind of weaponization that can undermine democracies. So I think this should absolutely be in scope. It should be central. In a way, problems like that are a little bit above the pay grade of what I'm aspiring to with this CASBS project. I've also seen in my own experience and just reading the papers, there are a lot of cases where people have the right intentions, but the people who understand the math don't understand the world, and the people that understand the world don't understand the math. And we need a better shared language so that people from different domains can communicate when they design these socio-technical systems. And I think that's very isomorphic, to use a math term. I think it's very similar to the motivation that Christopher Alexander had when he designed a common language for our built environments. I think we need a shared language so that people from multiple domains can collaborate and we build our cognitive environments. So I'll end with that.
Thank you very much. And let me just please allow me for a short comment on that. I'm a psychologist myself, and all those days when I'm listening to how it would be good and helpful to bring in psychology to also make it maybe morally more safe to do computer sciences, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, oh, wow, be careful, because there's critical psychologists who are certainly aiming for a societal relevance. They are very aware of the pitfalls and biases we as psychologists apply. But there are so many more. Actually, the mainstream psychology, the way we get published, is by application of so much of what you, James, also described, of the vulnerabilities that are exploited by behavioral scientists, that have been laid as a foundation, used as foundation for so many of those social media and many other more of those soul-destroying, democracy-destroying applications. And I think to deploy more of a critical or also positive psychologist point of view, where you think from a humanistic point of view, from the capacity building parts, and not only that individuals are flawed and let's make money out of it. But it's definitely not a one-way track, and psychology is not, okay, this is how people work, and now if we understand how people work, we can do better computer science. Right. And I'm very interested to hear also in the future more of how your work is going. And let me please also thank Hannes Wertner, Julia Neidhardt, and all the people here at the TU. I'm joining this week at the faculty, and I'm very proud of this way of working interdisciplinarily, which has not been possible in my academic career so far. It's only digital humanism that made it actually possible, so for the first time. But maybe to round up, I would love Sally to hear what if you have any. Yes, I'm sure.
Just one thing, maybe it's about interdisciplinarity again, because that's come up a lot, and there was something earlier and I wanted to respond to, but then we moved on to autonomous weapons. I mean, I'm sure you've all got it next to your bed, the Digital Humanism book, and I have a short chapter in that about interdisciplinarity. And one of the things that I say towards the, I mean, it's a very short chapter, is I think, yeah, I mean, I've done, work together with people from other disciplines for a long time, and I don't particularly, you introduced me as an economist. I don't identify as that, and they certainly wouldn't accept me into their club. But I think there are kind of three things that are really important for good interdisciplinary work. And what I put in there is time. And we know the problems of getting time because of project funding, which doesn't kind of allow that. But I think you have to find ways. And I think that's one of the things we've tried to do in the Digital Society program. Mutual respect, so that, for each other's vocabularies, methods, questions, concerns, and humility, that you don't have all the answers. And I think, not all of us possess all of these qualities, but I think it's certainly something to kind of strive for. And so maybe to end, sounds like a beginning of a bad joke, but a few years ago, I was responsible in the Dutch Academy for their digital humanities program. And we had a project that involved, it was about regime change in Indonesia, a big issue for the Dutch, over the past kind of 70, 80 years. And we had a computer scientist, a mathematician, and a political anthropologist walking into this project. And they spent 6 months talking about what they meant by network. Because in each of those disciplines, network means something really quite different. So, the political anthropologist was, a political elite as a network, and how are they going to kind of understand these in this kind of huge newspaper corpus, and how are you going to measure that? Sorry?
Were they made with scientists? You were talking of were made or women or men?
Women and men.
Are these three people?
Yeah.
2 men and 1 woman. But I think, they had the luxury of the time to kind of think about, well, what do we mean by a network, and a politically elite network, and how are we going to measure it? How are we going to extract it from this corpus? How are we going to interpret it? And you really do need time to discuss that.
Yes. I thank you very much. And I think humility is another great example you're giving. And Manfred and James just came in with the replication crisis. It's true. My science already went through with it, but with not so much humility yet, I believe. We're still a lot into this problematic approaches. And I will gladly look forward in connecting those dots also in the future. So thank you very much. And joining those peaceful forces, actually. Yeah.
We have a coffee break now, and on top of that, we've also done with, let's say, the public part here that is streamed. So the next session we're going to have is to work on the roadmap, which is not going to be streamed to YouTube, but open to everyone joining via Zoom. So we have that also online. But now for some coffee. So.